Good morning. Thank you for joining us for an oral history interview at the Campbell County Training School Complex. My name is Tanya Meredith, the oral historian. Please state your full name for the record.
Delores Nash Hicks.
Thank you, Delores. So, to begin, could you please tell me about your family, your mom and dad, any siblings, and where you were born?
I was born in the village of New London, Virginia, my father's hometown. Then I had 6 siblings, 4 sisters, and 2 brothers. We were all very fortunate to attend another Rosenwald school, which was located in Evington, Virginia. I was transferred to the Campbell County Elementary School in 1953 in the 4th grade. So I attended the Campbell County Elementary School here, a former Rosenwald school, 4th through the 7th grades. And of course, then we transferred to the Campbell County High School. Here at the Campbell County Elementary School, I remember all of my teachers, the 4th through the 7th grades. There were 5 buildings located here. My first grade teacher at the Evington Elementary School was Mrs. Ruby Mickles, and she just recently passed away at the age of over 100. And then when I came here, my 4th grade teacher was Mrs. Nellie Stewart. That classroom was located over here in the building that we now associate as being our office building. Behind that building, connected, was the lunchroom. We did not have a kitchen in the lunchroom, so the lunches were prepared in the former principal's house, which was located on the hill. The cooks were Mrs. Gladys Rose and Mrs. Henderson. I don't know her first name. Her husband, Mr. Burl Henderson, was the janitor. So these ladies prepared the lunches. He put them in his car and brought them down the hill to the lunchroom. During my research, there was something that really took my attention. I did not know this. We refer to this complex as on the hill. But during my research, I found out that one of the things that Mr. Rosenwald asked that the schools be built on was on the hill, on a hill. But the only school in this area of the 16 Rosenwald schools located in Campbell County, this and the school in Alta Vista were the only 2 schools that I have found that were built, constructed on a hill. Now, my 5th grade classroom, that building is not standing there. That was to the southwest of the main original building. There were 4 classrooms in that particular building, and the library was in one of the rooms, and there were 3 teachers in that building. My teacher there was Miss Gills, later Mrs. Lucretia Wingfield. And then I came down to the original building, which had 4 classrooms also. But in that particular building, the principal's office was located. We had 2 6th grade classrooms and 2 7th grade classrooms. Mrs. Georgia Lander was my sixth grade teacher. She also served as the music teacher. The other sixth grade teacher was Mrs. Marie Patrick. My seventh grade teachers were Mrs. Mary Marshall, who served as the school secretary. She taught me in the morning, and Mrs. Duncan, Hazel Duncan, who was the wife of the principal, Mr. Orange Duncan, at the high school, taught us in the evening because Mrs. Marshall did the financial secretary work for the school. During the seventh grade, the students from the Bocock Elementary School were transferred over here to this school while they build a new Bocock School. And here we had festivals, we had bazaars, the schools, what I refer to as feeder schools, meaning those were the schools that closed down because of inadequate facilities, would come here to participate in May Days and 4-H programs. And of course, the PTAs were here. I particularly enjoyed the festivals. I remember there were two sisters, and when we had the festivals, the spring festivals, each class had a booth, and these two sisters would portray Sleeping Beauties. They would switch over. One would stay in the little bed for a while, and then the other one would come. Our outings were to walk up the hill to the tower. I never did go, my class, I don't remember ever going up there to it. We had a baseball field to the left of this building. It was really interesting because I didn't remember where the outdoor toilets were. But I understand they were on the way up to this tower. And back to the fourth grade classroom. Every year, once a year, the students from the campus would go through the fourth grade classroom to get a cod liver oil pill. And then we would come back, of course, to our classrooms for the rest of the day. Interesting thing, one of the teachers, Mrs. Irene Turner, who was the third grade teacher, she was also the art teacher. There was an original painting of hers left in the building, but because it had been in there so long, it kind of decayed. So I don't know if we'll ever get that repaired or not. But when I came here in the fourth grade, Mr. James W. Jones was the principal, and he was the principal here until this school closed and they built the Central Elementary School, later known as the J.J. Frey School, across the road. The school buses that we rode, most of us had to come quite a distance to school. So my dad became the school bus driver from the New London community because that one-room school closed in 1949. So they chose my father as the bus driver. In my early days of attending schools, a lot of the smaller two-room schools, because of their physical condition, had to be closed. So in 1949, the one-room school in New London, Virginia, closed. The county chose my father, James Nash, to become the bus driver to transport students from the lawyers community, from the Mount Moriah community, to the Evington school. He only drove to the elementary school in Evington. And then later, when that school closed, they transferred him to drive from New London down Mount Moriah, down Townfolk Road to the Evington School. The high school students transferred from the school bus to Mr. Ed Smith's bus to be transferred to the high school in Russell. And then later on, I have forgotten really how the school buses used to bring the students from the high school back across to pick up the students here at the elementary school, simply because they have changed the road. But we used to have to walk down the hill to 24 and get on the school buses, because if I remember correctly, the school buses did not come up on the hill. The May Day program was, we had activities outside, and most of the time they took place out here in front of the building, to the side of the now standing auditorium. And we had what we called a maypole. And there were young students, Mrs. Duncan, most of the time we had to wear little blouses with little short sleeves and full skirts. And you had ribbons, if you will, tied to the top of a pole. And you go in and out under each other and you wrap the maypole. And then we had other activities on the ground too. We're hoping that we will be able to install a flagpole out here. But there was something I forgot to mention, and that was in the beginning. I understand that before, of course, in my mother's time, when the students could not get to school, they were allowed to stay in the principal's house sometimes, and they had to pay $10 a month for tuition to stay at the principal's house. However, back in that time, I understand that was quite expensive, especially if you had 2 or 3 children in your family, to try to help them get an education. I found it quite fascinating. And also a lot of these young men and women, and of course, they went on to their future endeavors, studies. And Mr. Jones, the principal, was a former student of the Campbell County Training School. So, and his home was in Evington. And so, believe it or not, all of my siblings and I, by attending the Campbell County Elementary School, was under his principalship. Yes. And then, of course, my mom attended the school in her day. And back then, the school only went to the 11th grade.
Ms. Delores, do you remember, how did you heat the rooms, the schools in the wintertime?
Oh, yes, that's very interesting. Since the renovation project has begun, there are the places where the pot-bellied stoves or the long stoves sat in the middle of the floor. And I remember one incident that while I was attending Evington School, we had the long stove. And of course, the students got to school and they kept their coats and things on, as well as here, and gathered around the stove. And one student pushed me against the stove. So I had a big burn, of course. And then in the 4th grade room and in the secondary building, you can see where the chimneys, where the stoves went into. And if I remember correctly, before the renovation started, in here we could see where the stoves went to the chimneys in this building also. They were heated, and Mr. Henderson, who was the janitor, would come around to each room and, as we used to call it, stoke each stove. Up under the main building here, the original building, is some coal that was left after these stoves weren't in use anymore. And in fact, we have a replica. Someone donated a pot-bellied stove that's in storage in the secondary building. And Mr. Henderson, I can't remember him coming in the classroom, but we always had nice heat in the classroom. And of course, later they put in the, the heating system and everything. But other than that, and I often say, the students always bought the lunches, most of them, in the brown bags. And each room had a cloakroom where we put our jackets and shelves where we placed their lunches. And we used to have bring jars to school that peanut butter or jam or jelly used to be in for our drinking glasses, because we had the water in the buckets, in the dippers. Of course, we had our main studies for the day. To begin with, we always had some type of, we repeated the allegiance to the flag. We said the Lord's Prayer or a Bible verse. And I still remember, thank goodness, that when I was at the Evington school, which I brought on with me down here, I was the second in line to recite the 100th song at a PTA meeting. But my first grade teacher was Mrs. Ruby Mickles, the young lady that was supposed to do the reciting at the PTA meeting. She couldn't make it. So I ended up doing the 100th song, and I still remember it. And some of the favorite games we used to play were the marbles, drawing a circle on the ground and shooting marbles. We played Annie Oval, which you threw the ball over the roof of the building. There was two teams, one on one side and one on the other side. We played jump rope, jack rocks. We had little races, of course, the softball, and chat with your friends and things during recess time. And then we very seldom, I really don't remember many of the substitute teachers here, because back in the day, our teachers were so dedicated to their students. They thought that they had to be here. And during the time I was here, up until the time I graduated in 1962, we only had one school superintendent, and her name was Mrs. Lottie Finale. And I remember when our teachers told us that she was coming to visit us, we used to have to clean the windows, the desk, make sure the room was in perfect order, so that she would give us a good referral that we had a nice classroom. Her sister, Miss Ruby Herndon, would always be with her. But again, during my research, I have found out there were quite a few schools in Campbell County, but only 15 to 16 were built with the Rosenwald school funds. However, I didn't realize that there were so many things that our parents did without, so that we could get an education here at the training school, you know? they had to travel a long ways. And if you would, it's such an interesting story. I not only found out about the other schools that were feeder schools if you were to the Campbell County Training School, I found out where the former principal's house, when it was torn down and rebuilt, is located near the intersection of Route 24 and Route 501. And another thing that used to happen with the students here is you would gain new friends, and then you would go visit their churches, and you would attend choir festivals or church revivals, or just go visit them sometime in exchange services.
What time of day did school begin and when did it end? Do you remember the times about?
By my daddy driving the school bus, and he had to go maybe 45 minutes to pick up the students and lawyers. I guess we left home before 7 o'clock, and the school day probably started around 8:15, and then it closed around 3. And I often refer to the fact that back in the day, the teachers used to make sure that the students got on the buses, went back in the classroom, got their hats and their pocketbooks, and shut the door behind them, simply because during study time in the classroom during the day, we didn't have so much of an overload, if you will, of lessons to do. So while she is giving us lessons to accomplish in the classroom, she had time to check the papers of this lesson that she had previously given us. So about that time, and of course, before we left school, we had to make sure that our desks were in order. The fire was out in the stove, and the room was clean so that we could begin our classroom day the next day, and everything would be in order.
Can you tell me what you remember about your materials, the books that were used in the class?
Well, when we were here, the main subjects, of course, was arithmetic, now known as math and geometry and whatever, but was math, arithmetic, reading. We had geography and history, which later were combined to become social studies. Spelling, which was a main thing. And of course, you had to learn how to print and then learn later how to do cursive writing. And of course, now I look at the students and they have the computers and everything. They don't have to go through all of that. Or sometimes I understand if you didn't get your cursive writing just right, the teacher might pluck you on your fingers to make sure that you would get your letters and your numbers correctly. And of course, every night after you went home, and sometimes you did it in the morning, you had to feed the animals, the chickens, go get the cows, and do that in the evening, as well as get your wood in, your coal in, cut wood if necessary, get the cows, milk them. All of this had to be done. The kitchen dishes cleaned, the floors swept before you did your homework. Sometimes you had to do your homework by the lantern. I was very fortunate to been able to do mine by electricity. But then, of course, the books that your siblings used the year before, they were passed down I understand that even maybe back when the training school was, the students that were able to come to the training school, they had books and passed from sibling to sibling, and some of them were sewn together with thread so that the next sibling could use it. And of course, we had essay contests, spelling bees from the things that we had learned through the school year here.
I recall you mentioning bathroom facilities. Can you describe? Can you describe those for me?
As I said before, I've had the opportunity to go around and find the locations of all of the former Rosenwald schools here in Campbell County. And I went to the one, the Gladys Rosenwald School, located on Long Island Road in Gladys, Virginia. The outdoor facility is still standing, but they were constructed with, on the inside, you had one door to go in, you had one for the girls and one for the boys. And there were 2 holes cut in an upraised stand, like, if you will. And it was open in the back. And they set these structures set on a hole that was dug in the ground for the waste materials. And as far as I know, well, they put chemicals on it to do away with it before the next school term started. I know at my house when we were growing up, we had the same facilities. So my dad would put lime on it. So I'm assuming that was a process they used here. I don't quite know how they did it. But the ones here, I understand, were located to the northwest side of the secondary building. And we had, each class had a certain time to go because some of the classes had to walk across the campus to get to them because they were located over there.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to pivot just a little bit into the community and any experiences that you remember, especially because this was a time of segregation. Do you remember anything happening in the community? Any experiences that you had between the whites and the blacks, the responses to going to a Rosenwald school? Do you?
I was very fortunate to, I remember some of the incidents that happened around and about in the different communities. For example, like at EC Glass with the integration of EC Glass with Owen Cardwell and Linda Boxdale. I remember the sit-ins at the Kresge store downtown on Main Street. And in fact, one of the young ladies, her name was Miriam Gaines, she did not finish her high school education at the Dunbar High School in Lynchburg because she was one of the major sit-inners at the Kresge. So she ended up coming to the Campbell County High School. I was not directly involved in any of those things because I often say my family and I, by my daddy being the garbage man, trash man in the Timberlake area, we were always exposed to all the cultures. However, one instance kind of sticks out in my mind is when the churches, the United Methodist Church became united. Um, there were a lot of members of the majority culture who did not want to intermingle, if you will, with the African American communities. But out in my community, there were unspoken rules. I often refer to the fact sometimes um, there were certain places in the neighborhood you knew within yourself that you were not allowed to go. I do remember, for example, at Kresge, my dad used to go down and buy hot dogs like on Friday evening. And there was a certain section that the, if you will, colored had to sit. I do remember certain restrooms, excuse me, that you had to go to. Certain places you had to sit at theaters, the Academy Theater, the Warner, the Paramount. You didn't really risk yourself of going out at night by yourself as an African American, because at that time there were groups of people who literally, if they caught you out by yourself, you never know what would happen to you. But on the whole, I wasn't directly involved in any of their activities. However, I do know that they were there, and you just had to be careful of where you went and what you did and what you said, However, my family and I did not recognize this for a long time. My dad was a handyman, and there were 7 children, and I didn't realize it at the time until later in life that Dad carried us to help him do, if you will, jobs at other cultures' houses, cut grass, rake leaves, cut hedges, pick up fruit and things. I did not realize it, that they actually didn't pay my dad for his work, but they provided us with fruit, vegetables, and things that we may not have had. However, my dad always had a vegetable garden, and he shared with the people in the community. And then especially at homecomings, that was one of the things in the neighborhood that was a big event for the African American community, is each church had a Sunday set aside every year for a homecoming. So we would do a regular service in the morning, if you will. Then we would have dinner where all of the ladies would bring out their beautiful tablecloths of their special dishes, make special dishes to be served to the surrounding church members that would come visit us. And then we would also have choir festivals, revivals, children's days for it. And I shall never forget, even before you asked me about, if you will, integration, Randolph-Macon Women's College was one of the colleges that was supportive of the Methodist culture. 4 ladies from Randolph-Macon Women's College came and did an exchange service at my home church in New London. And so, in a way, I've always been exposed to the other culture. I remember the protest here across the road where someone kept damaging the memorial sign across the road to mark the landmark, to make a landmark of the original Campbell County Training School site. But we are excited about the renovation of this most historical business. these historical buildings. I think all of us that are working on this project, we become excited when we get to talking about it. And I think they like to tease me sometimes about it because I think I'm the oldest one right now on the committee that went here. And there are so many fond memories. Um, every now and then you think of something that you hadn't thought of in a long time, you know? Um, and I still see a lot of the students who once attended here while I was here. I was very fortunate by way of Mr. Megason, who is the supervisor of the project here, on-site supervisor, shared with us some pictures of some students from 1956 who were standing on the steps over here at the main building. And I have been trying to identify them this past week. And Miss Edith Campbell Berman was the teacher at that time. And we hope to display that soon. And of course, we are hoping that in the future, when this project is completed, it will be used as it is now, already has been established as a community endeavor. We're hoping to have a museum, maybe a wedding or two. We've already had some activities here, such as birthday dinners. We had a tour that was great for the reunion, baby showers. It's a community effort because so many organizations have supported us, and we appreciate it very much.
Very good. So I have two more questions. So the first one is, why is it important that we remember the legacy of these schools? Why is this important? The work that you're doing to restore the schools.
I do a lot of historical exhibits. My latest one was in New London Historical Day this past October. And I made the statement that whether other cultures want to really acknowledge it or not, the African American culture is really what I think our modern day culture today was built on, because we were the ones who tilled the soil so that those persons became very outstanding in their community because they were making money off of the toil, the sweat of another culture's brow. Am I explaining it right? And as I was traveling over Campbell County, especially down in the Red House community area, I found out that the remnants of the persons who worked these plantations, their settlements are on the backside of the plantations. And when I look around and see all of the things and then go back and read history of the things that African Americans really developed where other cultures really made improvements on it, we need to recognize that we were an important part of what made America, if you will, what it is today. And I think by this building being here, it will remind people, hey, it's a great thing. It's a part of our history. And I have also found out that it's so many people. They just knew it's a school. They had no idea that it's an important part of the whole world's history if you really want to get to it. And by it being hopefully a community project, more and more people will be informed and realize that, hey, this is something that I want to learn about, become involved in it. You know, I think it's going to be very, very important. And I'm hoping that more and more people will become involved in it. Now that the word is out, if you will, because we've had articles published in different magazines, we've been on TV, we've had different interviews here. The word is out that, hey, this is a great thing for us to know about, you know? And it's so many, for example, some of the people who here just in Russburg, their families were intertwined with the slavery and the progress it made. The slave owners' descendants and the slave owners' descendants got together and had a big reunion in Alta Vista around about a couple of years ago. And that was interesting to me. And talking along that line, I think it's funny. I told the people at the festival in New London, you best be careful how you talk about the other culture, because if you go back far enough in your genealogical chart, I may be your cousin. And that is fact.
What did you think of your education then, and what do you think of it now, about your education now that you received?
When I was a student, it was no question in the sense of the word about you as a child. Your parents, your teachers instilled in you that education was really a must. You had to listen to your teachers, and you had to get an understanding of what your teachers were attempting to instill in you. And then when you, every night, no matter what, your parents sat down with you and made sure that they went over your lessons that the teacher had assigned to you to bring back to school the next day. Then your parents supported your teachers. If you did something that was inappropriate at school during the school time that the teacher was trying to teach you something, your teacher went and told your parents, and your parents reprimanded you when you got home. And if you were staying with your grandmama until with your grandmother until your parents got home, you just may have gotten two reprimands to make sure that you knew that learning was important. Of course, like I said, we didn't have all of these classes that you had to take now. You just knew that there was no, and then when you had the parent-teacher associations was what it was called then, your parents were there to ask the teachers how you were doing. And from my parents instilling in me to respect my teachers, my principals, that legacy went on down through me. And when my children were in school, when I went to conferences, parent teachers conferences, I never went unless I heard my children with me, to let them know that not only did the teacher mean business, I meant for them to listen to the teacher and observe what was going on. Because the world, if you will, ideas and things had changed so much that they needed this education. I graduated from the Campbell County High School in '62, and then I attended community college for 2 years and took up child care studies, whereby then I was hired at the Yellow Branch Elementary School to work with in the special education department under Miss Mary Watts, who was also a student here at the Campbell County Elementary School. And besides that, I'm thankful for all that the teachers here at the Campbell County Training School and the high school meant to me, because I would not be where I am today, if you will, because I've been on a lot of tours. I have done, thanks for their their school training, living history exhibits at Sedalia, Poplar Forest, school, churches. So my, if you will, education background has been an awful lot to me. It has made me what I am today.
Thank you, Ms. Delores.
Thank you.
This is all wonderful.
Thank you
so much
Appreciate
for
it.
sitting with us today, sharing those memories. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.